Lagos was alive with energy. Cars honked, people rushed through the streets, and traders called out their prices. The air smelled of roasted corn and fried plantain. The city never rested. Amaka walked quickly through the busy streets. She was an architect with big dreams, always focused on work. Love was the last thing on her mind. Her phone buzzed a message from a client asking for urgent changes to a building plan. She sighed and continued walking, not paying attention to where she was going. Just then, she bumped into someone. A man holding a stack of old books almost dropped them. Their eyes met briefly before they both apologized and moved on. That evening, Amaka met her best friend, Ifeoma, at a rooftop restaurant. The city lights stretched out before them, twinkling like stars. "You work too much," Ifeoma teased. "When will you let love in?" Amaka laughed and shook her head. "Love is a distraction," she replied. At that moment, her eyes landed on a familiar face, Tade, the man she had bumped into earlier. He was sitting at a nearby table, deep in conversation with an older man. Their eyes met again. This time, he smiled. Something about him felt strangely familiar, but Amaka quickly looked away. The next day, Amaka ran into Tade again at a bookstore. He introduced himself as a historian and writer researching Lagos' forgotten ancestral sites. "I'm working on a book," he said. "There are places in this city that still carry the spirits of our ancestors." He told her about an abandoned courtyard hidden in the heart of Lagos, once a royal palace. "You should see it," he said. "As an architect, you might find it interesting." Amaka hesitated but eventually agreed. Something about the way he spoke made her curious. The following weekend, Tade led Amaka through old streets lined with faded buildings. They stopped in front of a large rusty metal gate. When he pushed it open, a rush of warm air passed over them. The courtyard was quiet, overgrown with plants. In the center stood an old stone well, surrounded by carved symbols. Amaka stepped forward, touching the carvings. A strange feeling washed over her, like she had been here before. She looked at Tade. "This place, it feels familiar." Tade smiled knowingly. "Maybe because it remembers you." That night, Amaka had a dream. She saw a woman dressed in royal attire standing in a court. A warrior stood beside her, his eyes full of love. But suddenly, shouts filled the air. The woman was taken away, separated from the warrior. Amaka woke up, her heart racing. The next day, she told Tade about the dream. He looked at her closely. "What if you're connected to this place in ways you don't understand?" he asked. Amaka wanted to deny it, but deep inside, she knew something strange was happening. As Amaka spent more time at the courtyard, the visions became stronger. She saw glimpses of feasts, warriors, and royal ceremonies. Tade explained that the queen who once ruled here was betrayed and erased from history. No one remembered her name. One afternoon, Amaka placed her hand on the wall and suddenly heard a voice whisper, "You must remember." Amaka fell into trance and saw more vision. Seeing herself dressed as a queen in a gathering royalties. Amaka later regained consciousness and was carried out of the courtyard. Later that evening, they went to a restaurant. She pulled back, shaking. I think I was her." Tade nodded, as if he had known all along. One morning, Amaka received an email from her company. The real estate developer planned to demolish the courtyard and build a shopping mall. She felt a sharp pain in her chest. If the land was destroyed, the last piece of the queen's story would be lost forever. Ifeoma noticed Amaka's troubled expression. "What's wrong?" she asked. Amaka explained everything. "You have to fight for it," Ifeoma said firmly. But Amaka wasn't sure. Was she ready to risk her career for a past she barely understood? One evening, Amaka sat by the well, lost in thought. Tade joined her. "You're afraid," he said gently. She nodded. "This place means something to me, but I don't know if I can save it." Tade reached for her hand. "The ancestors brought us together for a reason. Maybe this is our second chance." A warmth spread through Amaka. The love from the past wasn't just a memory, it was alive again. That night, Amaka had another vision. The queen stood in front of a council, fighting for her land. She had been betrayed, but she had never stopped fighting. A voice whispered, "You must do what she could not." Amaka woke up with a sense of purpose. She had been given a choice to let history repeat itself or to change the ending. She knew what she had to do. Amaka and Tade gathered historians, activists, and locals to protest against the demolition. The developers dismissed them. "It's just an old courtyard," they said. But Amaka stood firm. "It's a piece of our history." The media picked up the story. More people joined their cause. The pressure on the city council grew. Still, the developers refused to back down. The battle wasn't over yet. On the day of the final decision, Amaka stood before the city council, her heart pounding. She spoke about the importance of preserving heritage, of honoring those who came before. "If we erase our past, what do we leave for the future?" she asked. Tade watched her with pride. She was no longer just an architect, she was a leader. After hours of debate, the verdict came. The land was declared a historical site. The courtyard would be preserved. That evening, people gathered at the courtyard, celebrating their victory. Lanterns glowed, and music filled the air. Amaka stood by the well, feeling the presence of the ancestors. The queen had finally been remembered. Tade came to stand beside her. "You did it," he said. She smiled. "No, we did." As they held hands, a gentle breeze passed through the courtyard, almost like a whisper of approval. As Amaka and Tade danced, the past and present blurred. For a brief moment, she saw the queen and her warrior, smiling at them from across time. Their story had finally found its ending. Love had returned to the city of ancestors. Weeks later, Amaka and Tade worked together to restore the courtyard as a cultural site. Visitors came to learn about the forgotten queen. Her name, once lost, was now spoken with pride. Amaka no longer doubted her choices. She had saved the past and found love in the process. And in the heart of Lagos, where ancestors still walked, love lived on.